Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as VRTrader.com. He was the #1 U.S. stock market timer in the January 2020 edition of Timer Digest. He's speaking to us from Arizona. Welcome back to the show, Mark.
My pleasure. Thanks, Jim.
Mark, do we still have the special offer for our listeners?
We sure do. It's 2020 half off. So what listeners have to do is go to VR. VR stands for Volume Reversal. VRTrader.com. VRTrader.com, and anywhere that you place a note, when you place an order on the order page, there's a little spot for promo code, and the promo code is 2020 half off, just like it sounds. 2020 HALFOFF. And they will get 50% off on any of the products.
The coronavirus lockdowns are gradually being lifted. Here in British Columbia, it's going to be the long weekend, Victoria Day next week, the week before Memorial Day in the U.S. In the U.S., it seems that the Republican states are opening up first compared to the Democratic ones. For example, Oregon staying locked down until July 6th. So, could this division between Republican and Democratic states affect the stock markets?
That's an interesting question. Really haven't thought about the connection to the stock market. It's certainly ridiculous when you think about it, that why Democratic states would do one thing and Republican states do another. It's almost like we've got the Civil War underway here in the U.S., North and South. Instead of that, it's Republican, Democrat, and it's really extremely aggravating and frustrating. No matter what side you're on, that there would even be this kind of ridiculous division to begin with, and then now it gets down to the lifting of the veil on the virus situation, and they're drawing it on political lines when political lines shouldn't have anything to do with it. It should be based on, concentration of illnesses in a particular area and so forth. It sounds like New York distributed a lot of the disease around the country from what I was reading. So places like here in Arizona are slowly lifting up them as well. And as far as the reaction, to the stock market, the market seems to like the fact that we're opening up. And of course, the big unanswered question is what kind of business will result now that the country is opening up. I mean, will things really return that fast? Will we see a lot of bankruptcies, business starting really slow, which we assume is the case? And if the unfortunate turn of events that we start to see an increase in any of the cases of the virus, that's not going to be received very well across the board. And then, of course, the way the Democrats seem to be reacting, they'll find an excuse to start yelling and screaming, hey, let's shut the whole country down again. As far as they're concerned, the country can go into a depression so that they could hopefully win an election in November. The whole thing is just preposterous. I mean, Donald Trump was on the air within the last hour and a half, giving a little bit of a press conference in the White House, and he was talking about, treason on the part of some of the people involved in this whole scandal to try to unseat him as a president. And then, of course, in my opinion, has been forever that the press should have been charged with sedition or perhaps treason for their conduct, which has led to a lot of the separation between the Republicans and Democrats, and getting down to even to this lifting of the veil on the virus. So it's horrible what's going on out there. There are really some really bad players. And you can mention a lot of big names. We've done that before in the broadcast. Big name players that are involved in unfortunately creating this division. You know, a name like George Soros comes to mind, and we now find Bill Gates is heavily involved, and you know, it just goes on and on here in terms of bad players out there trying to disrupt the system. So at some point, the stock market will correct. You know, it has had a big run up here. You know, so may go away. Maybe it's the end of May, not the beginning of May. We have the election coming up in November, and I'm probably anticipating a lot of your other questions here. But based on seasonality studies I've seen during a presidential election year, you tend to get some type of a pullback during the summer, sometimes sharp ahead of the election because of the uncertainty. So you've got that plus the risk of the virus starting up again, and varying that against the business situation, how it unfolds or doesn't unfold.
Due to the lockdowns and businesses closing, some of them perhaps forever, with a lot of jobless people around for a long time, do you think the markets have already priced that possibility in?
So much of what we're seeing in the markets, Jim, unfortunately, is manipulation. I mean, we've got the federal government printing trillions of dollars. We've got the plunge protection team out there, which was the enactment from Ronald Reagan, the Working Group of Financial Markets executive order back in 1988, where the government could come in the way Japan does and buy stocks and ETFs. So, you know, they may keep the market up regardless of how many people are out of work, for as long as they can, to try to mask any underlying problems out there, thinking that if they keep a market up and create a wealth effect, you know, businesses would be more encouraged to spend money, hire people, and eventually turn things around versus letting the market come down based on negative earnings and other negative news. So, you know, I think force of gravity prevails, and at some point you do get your corrections, but you do have that strong arm in there buying and supporting the market. So the net result would be that unless, because the variable, of course, is the election in the fall, and who knows, maybe even if the Democrats come in and the plunge protection team is there, they could still goose the market up higher. So I hate to say it's only contingent on the election, but normally I would expect to see, you know, pullback in the summer and even the possibility of seeing new highs. Today, for example, Thursday, we actually saw the NASDAQ up for the year, plus not regaining all its losses, but actually plus for the year. So, almost there. So that's really interesting considering all the negatives that are out there. Technology is leading the way. Unfortunately, that technology is limited to about half a dozen stocks, which really control most of the index. But that's got to be part of this manipulation I'm referring to. I don't think it would happen without the intervention of the government and the Federal Reserve and the Treasury and all the other things that are going on in the background. But anyway, bottom line is that I think the goal is to keep the markets up, and you might even see the markets into new all-time highs. And it's not such a great statement after what's happened today with NASDAQ, but you may see that happen here between now and the end of the year, if not sooner.
Could lockdowns being lifted sooner than later lead to a shorter recession?
You would think so. The faster you can get the people out there, the less likely or less severe the recession would be. So the answer would be yes.
We're hearing more and more the coronavirus panic was overblown, overhyped, and that the lockdowns maybe shouldn't have been put in place. What are you hearing?
Not really hearing anything. It's a question of, a bit of, common sense. There's no question that we overreacted to it. It's a bad flu. I'm not young. I'm 72 years old, but they say the older you are, the more at your risk, particularly if you have underlying health conditions. I don't have any serious underlying health conditions, but knock on wood, so far I've been okay, taking my vitamins and stuff. I said definitely it was an overreaction. I think the controls should have been where it was being most hard hit, such as New York. It's surprising California really hasn't done that bad, considering all the concentration of people out there, or maybe it's because it's younger people versus older people. But definitely it was an overreaction, in my opinion. And then, there's a term that is being bandied about now. You probably already heard it. Rather than call it a pandemic, it's a plandemic. P-L-A-N-demic. In other words, this was all meant to happen. This was no accident, and that's sort of where I'm I've really been coming from on this from day one. It just doesn't make any sense that this thing suddenly got released, and suddenly the country is shut down, and suddenly you find out people like Bill Gates are trying to get everybody vaccinated, and is not so upset if we lose part of the world population along the way. And then we read about papers, research documents, and I put one of those in my newsletter that was printed several years ago, sort of planning for a pandemic at some point, or what would happen if we created one. And there are a lot of bad players out there. So this was no accident. And the other big question is this covering up something else that we still haven't heard about yet, that's in the background, that besides China, besides Iran, besides the Republican Democratic adversarial relationship, there's still something else out there that triggered this whole thing. So and then we read and heard, and we talked about this last week. Last year, I don't know what the number is, but hundreds, if not thousands, of senior executives in the United States resigned last year. There's a broad pattern of a lot of resignations across the country, so you wonder if the word got out that something was coming, whether it was this pandemic or some other event. So there are no accidents out there. And we also had heard from people like Martin Armstrong, who I'm sure you've heard of. In one of his pieces, talked about how he had confirmed some selling in the stock market in January from some very big players, both I believe in Europe and the United States, anticipating a big decline in the market. So the pandemic was out there. It was no accident. And when you asked the question, did we overreact? Sure, we did. And it was probably planned to do that, to accomplish an objective, which we're still trying to figure out whether it was a political objective or there's something yet we're going to discover.
Now, I just read an article that said the Chinese intelligence think tanks are saying this virus could lead to a violent confrontation between the U.S. and China because the U.S. continually points its finger at China for letting this bug out along the planet's surface. Do you think there's anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I was always worried about that. The first thing I thought about with all the saber rattling here, that it could lead to some potential conflict. The question is it a real conflict or a manufactured one to distract us, much as the Cold War was a big distraction between us and the Soviet Union for so many years. It was just a distraction. The Vietnam War, a lot of these things came up. And I can't get into all the speculation and details about it, but these are all distractions from other issues that we weren't supposed to know about. So, yes, there's the risk of that, but the question is it really a risk? And if it does happen as a distraction from something else that we have yet to find out about, we still have the Iran situation out there, a lot of saber rattling going on there as well. So, very interesting times, I hope there is no shooting. It's not going to get anybody anywhere fast. Unfortunately, China is growing in strength, most militarily, and we know economically. And all this big cycle work says, during the course of the century, they're going to be the predominant player, taking and surpassing the United States. I hope that doesn't happen, but all the cycle work and the trend pattern seem to point to that ultimately anyway. So it seems to have been a little bit of a losing game unless Trump or his successors can really turn that around in terms of producing stuff, here in the Western Hemisphere and trying to diminish some of that power. But there is that risk of some conflict, and like I say, whether that's the real issue or not, but it is a risk out there, and I don't think, I don't really know how the markets are going to react. Listen, at least what has history told us, Jim, when there's wars, markets go up. They make money on wars, so I don't know if it's necessarily bad for the stock market, though it will be bad for the players.
Well, I'm just wondering, with the U.S. Pulling out of Afghanistan and out of Syria, so perhaps eventually Iraq as well, are those forces going to be needed elsewhere, and they're just planning for that?
Yeah, I don't know who would come out on top here. I mean, we're vulnerable too, and they have technology, so I really can't speculate whether they're planning on a conflict with China. So it's a tough question to answer here. Let's hope that that doesn't happen. And we still have the loose cannon up there in North Korea too. So still other trouble spots.
Well, it's either a double who's appeared or Kim Jong-un is in perfectly good health, and it was just a ploy by him to find out who was planning to take over from him and perhaps run a big purge.
Anything is possible. I hear rumors that there's clones out there of people that look and speak very similarly to the originals, and who knows, anything is possible. Lookalikes, you call them clones, or lookalikes, or whatever. Who knows? Could have been a planned event to try to find out. It's like the story about the emperor's new clothes. Find out who is telling the truth and who isn't.
And of course, using war as a distraction for economic problems. That's what Argentina was up to when it tried to take over the Falkland Islands from Britain and paid the price militarily. But for the people in Argentina, they were being told continually they were winning the war, and they were shocked when they lost.
Wow, didn't know that. That's interesting. Yeah, well, the truth is not the number one value for the communist Chinese. I mean, what we really have to understand is people don't, we really have a communist government there that's very dictatorial and very destructive to the people, and there's been a lot of demonstrations, as you know, recently, and we all hope and pray there's a turnaround in China the way we saw it in the Soviet Union, where we, get the people to take charge and reduce this. The communism is not the solution. I know many Democrats that are running for office in this country seem to be communist in one form or another. That's not the solution. So we all hope that there will be a political upheaval and change in China at some point, and we just have to hope and pray for that.
Well, the Chinese government's using the virus as an excuse to make it mandatory that all of your movements on your cell phone are now tracked.
So maybe that's one of the other reasons it was released, so they can control their population, and then all the smart people in this part of the world decided, gee, that's a good idea. Maybe we can control our people too, and then pull the same stunt on here and exercise authority that we really never had before, or never had the excuse to have before, and we went ahead and did it, and use the virus as the item for that to occur. It's amazing, when you think about how people were so willing to give up their freedoms for a virus. People have died in wars, and even in my own family back in World War II, that to fight for freedoms and everything, and people on a drop of a virus or a bug or a bacteria were suddenly willing to give up all our freedoms and listen to the dictatorial whims of our mayors and our governors and even the president to some extent, and in your case, Trudeau. It's just amazing. People willing to do it. I mean, I was against it. I just think, there's a bad virus or disease out there. I mean, are we talking a planetary invasion? I mean, if spaceships landed here from all over the universe and in the White House ground, like in Day the U.S. Stood Still with Michael Rennie, and we had, or a serious, demonstration of extraterrestrial power, then I could see people maybe acting the way they acted now. But for a virus, for a bug, I mean, you take your vitamins, you wear a mask, you try to stay away from people. I mean, there's some common sense stuff. I mean, and most of, I'm not a doctor, but, sometimes I guess I pretend to be in a certain sense. But if you take care of yourself and get enough nutrients and vitamins, and you don't eat garbage food and stay off sugar, and maybe gluten-free diet and all other good things, you can build yourself up to help avoid some of these problems. So I think so much of the health problems that exist for even the elderly, and I'm 72, have to do with the fact that I consider myself pretty healthy, is the fact of bad nutrition and diet. And I think, we should be talking about how to get the population healthy, rather than trying to create vaccines or try to find excuses to hide from some virus.
We'll have more with Mark Leibovit right after the break.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Cypress Development Corp is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mark Leibovit. Mark, we're hearing real estate markets could be on the edge of collapse. Are there any leading indicators in the stock market that could predict a real estate collapse?
Well, one of the things I'm looking at is some of the ETFs that track the real estate market, and there's some indication there that the negative ETFs, the ones that go up when the real estate goes down, and there's some slight indication of that at the moment. It's still too early to tell. Sort of my gut feeling about all that's happening out here with the government involvement and the trillions of dollars that's being printed and how fast the economy is going to respond or not respond. I'm more, as I mentioned, I think in a previous interview, more concerned about deflation than inflation. Everybody seems to think that's only inflation. I mean, I don't disagree that can't trigger at some point and will be a factor, but I'm just running it the other way, and that would be real estate prices. It might be even stocks for a short period of time in terms of a correction. It might even be the precious metals that everybody is so excited about, because when people have to liquidate, everything comes down together. So we'll just see how it unfolds here in the next. We'll find out here between now and the election, between now and the fall, whether we get deflationary forces kick in or not, and we start to see some signs of that real estate should pull off. And then on the commercial side, I think it's pretty clear. I've heard a lot of CEOs and other corporate leaders talk about how they may not need as much physical corporate space, that so many people are now accustomed to working out of their homes, and a lot of the rental prices for commercial real estate might drop, so there might be decline more on the commercial side than the residential side. That sort of makes sense since we've sort of adjusted to a new way of life, and that could certainly impact commercial real estate.
Are we likely to see the continuation of a V bottom in the markets, or could they put in a so-called W?
You hear about W's and V's and M's and all kinds of. The only formation that really works in the past from a trading point of view is those V bottoms. I mean, we got it here, we got it back in 2008-9, though it did come back and make a lower low later. But from a trading point of view, we had a V, and then in this particular event, and so far it's worked. And everything you've heard since then as well, it's not really a V. It's really it's an M or whatever it is, and it's going up and looks like a V, but then it's going to come back down again. It might. I mean, I'm not counting on that. I'm waiting for signals in the market to tell me that. The model that we had created for this year is our annual forecast model, which our listeners could buy for that 50% off. We didn't print all of it. We only have up half of the year in the newsletter. The rest will be put in shortly. It predicted the beginning of the year that we're going to get a big sell-off into mid-March, and then a rally that could carry into May, June, or maybe even July. And so what's happened here, just based on cycles, makes a lot of sense. And we had no knowledge of any virus or anything, or we knew something was coming politically, economically, or whatever, or even geocosmically, who knows, that would create a sell-off in the markets. So, our model was pretty much looking for a downer, then an up into the summer, and that wasn't, I guess you can call that a V, but, I wasn't counting on any particular formation. So you get sort of trapped into believing that certain formations are there. I mean, as far as, despite all the caution that we might want to put out about the recession or about the virus coming back or the negative or positive outcome of the election, or China suddenly blaring into war, or Iran suddenly flaring up, or Korea, all these things we're talking about, I guess the greatest surprise would be the market will just continue to climb a wall of worry, which is the expression that Joe Granville made so famous back in the 1970s and 80s. Then the market just continues to climb into new highs and fool everybody. I mean, that could happen just as easily, too.
We'll have more with Mark Leibovit right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Mark Leibovit. Mark, do gold and silver look like they are once again stuck in a trading range?
I don't know how to define a trading range. I mean, they've been moving up nicely, and they were long overdue for a rally. And of course, the news environment triggered a lot of interest in the metals. And then with the shutdown, as you know, others were unable to produce or mine. Well, I heard many of the mines were still operating, but the mints and so forth couldn't produce it, so there was a shortage of getting coins and bars, and that created a little bit of a panic in the markets, and everybody got more and more excited, and gold did make a nice recovery, got into the 1700s. But my sort of feeling, as I mentioned a moment ago, is I have a fear of potential deflationary forces kicking in here, and I may be wrong on this, but that would mean that despite all the excitement with gold here, you might see a shakeout coming here in the next few months before it goes higher again. I think overall it will go higher, and I might be early in my comment or even completely wrong in that comment, but as a trader, I don't want to be chasing gold and silver at these prices. I think, I bet we can buy them cheaper in the next couple months. So to me, it's not so much of a trading range. It's just a matter of ran up. Will it pull back and correct and give us another buying opportunity or not? I guess I'm wrong if, silver breaks through $18, $19 an ounce and gold breaks through, let's say, $1,800, then I'm probably wrong in that thinking. But at the moment, I'm not chasing the metals.
Is the strength of crude a big story?
It is, because it's recovering, particularly after that big COMEX contract scandal where the crude oil futures traded into negative territory because nobody could find a buyer for the physical crude at that time, and they had to close out a contract at a big loss and pay others to do it. The fact that we've recovered is a big story, and I see it recovering, and I think, there's going to be political influence here. I think Trump is going to do something, or other people are going to do something that have power to get the price back up again, because you got producers in Canada and the United States that are underwater, and that's an important national resource. So to stay independent and not be dependent on foreign oil and so forth. So you may see embargoes put on. Who knows what else could happen here, or subsidies. And I think, crude oil should, continue to tick higher. I sort of had the gut feeling when they took it down to minus $35 a contract that day. This was the washout bottom of the century. This is like getting everybody out of the crude oil business, and it was the bottom, and then we're going to go back to new highs, and we're going to go back to 60, 80, who knows, $100 a barrel again in crude, and that was the big washout that got everybody panicked. Over the years, I find that whenever they wash something out and kill it, and they scare the dickens out of everybody, that's usually the sign that it's more than just a short-term bottom. It could be a generational bottom. So we might have seen a generational low in crude now, and you might see it really surprise people to the upside in the coming months and years.
Are you bullish on cannabis stocks?
I have to be positive. They're so cheap. They come down so much. We've had a bear market since April of last year, and this consolidation. And I was encouraged the other day that Constellation Brands opted to exercise some of its options that it owns on Canopy Growth. I think bringing their control of the company up to about 40%. So that's a show of confidence that there's some bargain basement prices around here. I don't think cannabis is going away. I mean, it's still a new industry. The stocks got way ahead of themselves. people got overly excited about the production. There were production problems and all kinds of regulatory issues, and it was just a bubble on the short term. But ultimately, it's like any commodity. It will find a market and a value, and the regulations hopefully will continue to loosen up. And it has a lot of medicinal value, and I'm a big supporter of the medicinal cannabis. I'm not so much a supporter of the recreational, but definitely it has value. I've a lot of anecdotal evidence, and I think over time it will, if you're in the right stock and the right situation. Right now, I think you got to be looking at names like Canopy and Tilray and some of the big names that got murdered here, or if not those, some of the indexes that track some of these names. They're down so much from their highs, and they will be generating business. There's a expression, vice stocks, V-I-C-E, vice stocks, like alcohol, tobacco, gambling. There's cycles for that. When things aren't going so well, people turn to vice stocks, and maybe cannabis is a vice that will do well in this type of environment.
Trudeau just gave the World Health Organization 838 million Canadian. Is this another reckless spending by the Trudeau government likely to put a cap on the Canadian dollar?
So it sounds like Trudeau is another co-conspirator in this whole event, joining the World Health Organization, which is a bad player in this whole virus event from what we're hearing and seeing. The Canadian dollar is going to remain relatively weak to the U.S. dollar, because I see the U.S. dollar continuing to be more positive than negative. So, but that said, I don't see why Canadian business can't do well, particularly in the energy sector if crude oil prices do recover. Whether that's only limited to the U.S., I don't think so. I think Trump would protect prices both in Canada and the U.S., maybe blocking any imports to try to support the domestic prices. So that should do well for Canadian businesses in that industry, and those in the mining industry I think should do well, because the demand for the precious metals and base metals I think will increase here, particularly more toward the end of the year than now. But I think we're in an overall uptrend, and though we may experience some pullback temporary, in my opinion, in the meantime, it ultimately would resolve to the upside. So that should help. But the Canadian dollar itself, I don't see why it should take off if the U.S. dollar remains strong.
Are you seeing anything interesting in the commodity markets?
Well, let's see. That's a good question. As far as anything really interesting in the commodity markets, nothing other than watching copper, which has been a laggard. I thought that was going to do better than it had done. Lithium is still a play. Lithium has been doing well. Let me think out loud here. Uranium, we're long uranium ETF, so uranium has been coming back. I don't know if that's a result of these potential conflicts that we talked about earlier in the broadcast. So there's a lot of stuff going on, yeah. So you've got lithium, you've got uranium and gold and silver, more I think in the third and fourth quarter, crude oil recovering. And also, as I'm thinking out loud here, I'm forgetting the fact that we're very positive on the agricultural markets. There's been talk, and there has been some food shortages, and there's some predictions of some colder weather coming here toward the end of the year or next year. And there's even some predictions of increased volcanic activity on the planet that I read about. We'll see if that materializes, and that could, create a little bit of a problem. So, we're long a lot of ETFs in the agricultural sector, from soybeans through corn and even cattle and stuff. So, we're in there. There's a lot of action in the commodity space. I'm glad you brought that up.
Which markets are you watching this week?
Watching them all, Jim. I don't. I'm so frustrated because I don't know which one. When I say markets, basically the U.S. Equity markets, gold, silver, crude oil, all the commodities that I just made reference to with the ETFs, and just a lot of individual stocks that are attracting our attention from a trading perspective. We had a pretty decent week. In a lot of the shares this past week. We did get caught on the short side with some ETFs here in the last 24 hours, so we have to decide whether we want to stay with those or not here, because the market seems to be telling us it wants to push higher. Just as a matter of interest, today is the full moon, and sometimes markets, we've talked about this in previous broadcasts, that occasionally markets change direction around the lunar cycle. So if the market turned south from here Friday or into early next week, you could say we had a little bit of a trading top here at the full moon. So that would bail me out of my current short position in a couple of the reverse index ETFs that we're in. Otherwise, we may have to stop out of those.
How can people find out more about the Leibovit VR newsletters?
Okay, that's the big name for it, but the shortcut is VR Trader. VR stands for Volume Reversal, which is my proprietary technical tool, which, by the way, is available on Metastock and TradeStation for those technical analysts out there who want to actually get access to the Volume Reversal indicator and put it up on their screens. But vrtrader.com is where you go to sign up for the newsletters, and don't forget about that 2020 half off promo code, which gives you 50% off.
Mark, thank you so much for chatting with us.
My pleasure, Jim. It's always fun. Thank you.
My guest has been Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters. You can find him online at vrtrader.com. If you have any questions for Mark or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at House Street. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.